Previously, on Palace of Mirrors. As Darien and Gent rushed to destroy the engine of the Kraken, Twilight attempted to stop them. Dragonite unexpectedly intervened, killing Twilight and making it possible for Darien to put his plan into action. As he neared the engine, it became clear that he would have to physically destroy it. And now, Palace of Mirrors, Episode 24, Everything Must Fall, Part 2. The moment Darien's hands made contact with the engine, the Kraken vanished. For a brief moment, he wondered if the energy of the engine had undone him. He imagined it pulling on a thread coming out of his heart and hanging loose from his chest. The engine had only grasped it and yank, and he would become no more than a tangled pile. No. He still felt the lingering heat of the engine on his skin. He heard voices, children's voices. The world faded into view, but it was not the Kraken. He looked down on a ruined chamber that had probably once been a living room. Seating had been built into one of the walls. A screen, black as any night sky, sat in the opposite wall. A table and several chairs took up space to one side. Two girls, maybe a couple of years apart, stood hand in hand in the doorway. They shone lights around the room. It took Darien another moment to realize the one thing missing from the room. Him. He had no body. Like a ghost, he floated over the scene. He tried to speak, but not so much as his breath disturbed the air of that space. "Pretty cool, don't you think?" The other girl looked around, but she hung back in the entryway when the first girl swept into the room. "I don't know, Sandy. It could be dangerous. Uncle Rory said." Sandy wrinkled her nose and smirked. "Uncle Rory smells like feet." "But—" Sandy followed a set of footprints in the dust. Her feet matched them perfectly. "Come on, Cat. Don't be such a stick-up-the-you-know-where." She pounced on the couch and the wall, and a cloud of dust filled the air. "Uncle Rory doesn't know what he's talking about. Are you going to pass up a chance to explore just because that grumpy old man told you to?" Cat bit down on her lower lip, and then, with a deep breath, entered the room. Sandy jumped up and took the other girl by both hands. They danced in an arc. Their lights tangled about the space, illuminating dusty pictures on the walls and oddly shaped sculptures on the table. Darien took a moment to try to find himself. He had no body and no way to move. It should have filled him with a claustrophobic dread, but instead he found it comforting. The moment wrapped itself around him like a thick comforter on a cold night. The girls, sisters Darien had decided, explored the room as though it were a game. They told one another a story back and forth, each of them narrating a line or two before passing it on to the other. Darien would have smiled if he had a face. It was a nonsense story about a mean man with a bulbous nose who managed to turn himself into a silver elk and then eventually got eaten by a Ragnar cat. Sandy imitated its roar and the man's horrified final scream, and her sister exploded into giggles. They lapsed into silence, both of them sitting on the couch. Dust motes floated like stars in the beams of their flashlights. "Cat, do you ever wonder about the people who lived here? Where did they go? What happened to them? Why did they leave all this behind?" Cat shrugged. "I don't know. I guess because of all that stuff in those stories you're always telling me. You know, the Empire and the war and everything." Sandy lifted a glass sculpture of a soaring bird from the center of the table and hefted it back and forth between her small hands. "But it was all so big. It was all so beautiful. There's another room I found in this tower, a library, and there were all these books and paintings. The cities, the real cities, the big ones like on Leviathan, they weren't anything like the ruins here. They looked like dreams brought to life." "Another room? Sandy, you promised me you had stopped wandering. You're going to get hurt or or worse, and I can't go on living without you." Sandy waved her hand. "Don't be so dramatic. Think about it. If something happens to me, you get our room all to yourself." Kat slugged her sister in the shoulder hard enough that Sandy winced with the impact. "Don't talk like that. Don't even joke. I don't know where everyone went. I don't care what happened to them. All I care about is you." Sandy pouted. "Yeah, my arm can really tell." Her face softened. "Hey, I'm not going anywhere, though. It'll be like we talked about, you and me, together, no matter what." The image of the sisters warbled as a reflection in a pool of water disturbed by the wind, and vanished. For a moment, Darien saw only darkness. On its edges, he thought he glimpsed movement, as though something crept in circles about him. It stirred a sense of unease in Darien's chest, the way he felt as a child when the lights went out and the night shadows crept from their hiding places to fill the room. Just when he thought he couldn't take the feeling a moment longer, light bled into the darkness and an image took shape. The shadows fled to the silhouettes of two men standing against a sea of stars. No, not stars, but city lights. Buildings rose up against the sky. An emerald ring glinted on the hand of one man, and a thin golden crown clung crookedly to the head of the other. "You have done well. He will be pleased," said the man with the ring. "Then will you finally give me the ships?" The voice of the man with the crown trembled. "Once we have her in orbit, not a moment earlier. Your Majesty." He paused and laughed as though the title amused him. "The ship you arrived on is still here. Couldn't you take her into orbit now?" My ship is presently engaged with your vermin problem. In any case, he is most insistent that he come and collect her personally. He's embroiled in very delicate negotiations at the moment, or he would already be here." "The resistance grows stronger every day. I need those ships. You'll give them to me or you'll what?" The man with the ring stood a head taller than the other man. He used the height now, looming over the man in the crown. "I could snap my fingers and this pathetic ruin you call a city would be wiped off the face of the moon. Do you doubt I would do it?" "You wouldn't dare, not while I have." "I could take her before you even knew what had happened. Do not mistake the girl for leverage." "We both know she isn't just any girl. You said yourself he wants to collect her himself. She's important." The man with the ring took a step back lightly. "As you say, she's important. Just remember, you aren't. In any case, you need not worry about your resistance for much longer. Once we've left, you'll have the ships you need to rule this moon with an iron fist. And it will have cost you only a single life." The other man fidgeted with his crown, as though trying to find a way to make it fit. "You gave your assurance she would not be harmed." The man with the ring smiled wide, his teeth a blinding white that showed even as the rest of him was only shadow. "Please, I know the things you've done. The life of one girl is just a drop in the bucket. Sebastian would stand here and tell you everything we do is for her. He even believes it. That's okay." The man with the ring leaned in and lowered his voice. "You and I, though, we're men who know that sometimes getting things done means getting your hands dirty. Don't lose too much sleep over it. She is just one girl." He stepped away from the window, his shadow melding with the darkness of the room, so that Darien could no longer see anything but the green glint of the ring. This time, the image fractured like a pane of glass. Darien felt a sickening lurch in his stomach as he realized the men had been talking about Marialla, but he clung to the thin fact that she seemed to still be on 6. She hadn't been swept away to the stars, forever beyond his grasp. He could still find her. Even as the thought came, he felt an unsettling sense of doubt. A man with a thick black beard sat on a bench in a garden with more life than Darien had ever seen. Flowers of every shape and color grew from a bed of lush green grass. Trees, with thick trunks that would have cracked under the weight of snow and ice on six, rose overhead and displayed vibrant leaves. Insects, gossamer wings gleaming, buzzed between flowers. A woman with features as delicate as the flowers sat beside the man. Dark hair framed her sculpted face and violet eyes. Silence shimmered between them. They sat together, not quite touching, and stared into a reflecting pool. It was not so large as the one where Darien had killed Fantasia, but Darien felt her presence all the same. He shook it off figuratively, as he still had no body. The grass swayed, and Darien longed to feel it against his skin. "I love you," said the woman. She spoke softly, and broke the silence with an ease that drew all attention. The man started, his face red, and glanced at her out of the corner of his eye, as though he couldn't bring himself to meet her gaze. She did not wait for him to respond, but instead continued to speak. "I spent my life below the palace, in the chamber of mirrors. I begged it to speak with me. I thought maybe, there in that place where Talia first communed with the palace, it might take pity on me. I thought maybe there, at last, I would find my purpose. But the palace kept its silence, as it had since my mother's reign. I cried myself to sleep on that cold stone more times than I can count. I became as cold as that stone. I gave up all hope of having the guidance that was my birthright as the Empress." Darien realized as he watched the Empress speak that he had been wrong to think of her as delicate. She had a small build, but in her posture and in the steadiness of her eyes, he saw something as tall and proud as the trees. Not the trees of this garden, but the trees of his world. Trees evolved to survive the weight of winter. Still, even as the vizier took more and more power for himself, I continued to wait in the chamber. I couldn't let it go. Something in me said I had a duty to wait as long as it would take for the voice of the palace to find me. One morning I woke, and in the pool I saw your face. I loved you that very instant. Impossible to love when one is the Empress, but it happened all the same. You saved me that day." The man stood as though to flee, but his feet betrayed him and would not move. Tears fell down his face and caught in his beard to sparkle like stars. He spoke in a low voice. "I know only darkness. I know nothing of love. I know only silence." At last he looked over his shoulder, and their eyes met. I can't be the kind of man you deserve." "Even in darkness there are the stars. Is it not so? Even in silence there is peace." She stood and put her hands on his shoulders. "I am the Empress Esmeralda, born in the Palace of Mirrors. It is not for you to tell me who to love. If you tell me you do not love me, I will let you go and say no more." The man stood silent for a long moment, and at last let out a sigh. "Of course I love you. I've loved you from the moment I first knelt at your feet. How could I not?" She turned him gently to face her and leaned in. They kissed, there in that beautiful garden. They kissed and held one another tight, as though afraid to let go. Cracks spread over the image. They spread and fractured into fractal patterns, like frost creeping over a pane of glass. The world lurched around Darien, and he found himself falling. The image of the Empress in the garden shattered, and Darien tumbled through the shards, biting cold. He tumbled into dirt as fine as ash, and a howling wind poured out of a turbulent sky. Bitter dust caked his lips. Darien's feet tangled under him as he struggled to stand. He felt weary, unused to his body after the time he had spent as a ghost in the past. Clouds, red as blood-soaked bandages, rippled in the sky. These weren't the clouds of 6. They hung too high. The landscape brought little comfort, beams thrust from the earth in every direction. They almost looked natural, but something about their spacing felt too ordered. Darien had seen enough ruins to recognize that he stood amidst something that had been laid out by human hands. But these ruins looked nothing like the ruins on 6. The buildings here had been stripped away, leaving only the barest skeletons behind. When Darien stepped close, he could see the way the metal beams had melted and warped. They all leaned over in a single direction, forever frozen with the force of the cataclysm that had brought ruin to this city. Darien turned slowly and choked on a gasp when he saw the one structure that had not fallen. The Palace of Mirrors glittered atop a distant cliff, but it was the diminished glimmer of a beautiful thing that had been neglected. Darien had once dug a crystal glass from the field behind their house. He had wondered who once held it. He had wondered how it had come to be buried and forgotten. Almost, he felt it in his hands now. The cold of the earth where it had lain. The rough surface, marred by scratches and caked dirt. The heavy weight of it in his palms, in no way diminished by the years that had been forgotten. He began to walk towards the palace. Where else could he go? His feet left long dragging trails in the drifts of dust. He coughed, pain spidering through his chest. It doubled him over, and even when it had passed, he felt another waiting. He forged onward, over hills, through the forest of beams bent toward the palace like men bowing before an empress. The closer he got, the more the palace drew Darien. The outer walls curved like crashing waves, and the towers had been fashioned to resemble flowers. All of it glimmered with the translucent shine of glass. Could humans have truly built such a thing? It looked like something that had been plucked from a dream. The cliff rose hundreds of feet, so the upper towers were wreathed in mist that wove between them like a stream. The palace perched on the very edge of the cliff. Any other structure would have seemed to teeter there, but the Palace of Mirrors looked as though it would outlast the stone cliff and somehow remain. As Darien drew near, he saw that a double door had been set in the stone at the base. Gold framed the 20-foot archway, but the door itself had been carved directly out of the cliff stone. A relief of 2 women had been carved into the doors. They wore crowns and flowing gowns. Each faced the other, their hands meeting at the edge of each door. Their crowns shone with reflected light that found Darien's eyes even when he turned his face down to keep from being blinded. The sound of a man sobbing carried on the still air of the dead city. It reminded Darien of Kathy, on the nights when she dreamed of his mother. From an early age, he remembered struggling to wrap his small arms around her in comfort. Some nights he fell asleep in her lap, waiting for the sobs to quiet. From a distance, Darien saw him, just a slight shape against the backdrop of the cliff. He knelt in the dust, his face cradled in his hands. His body shook. Darien stopped short, uncertain what to do. He didn't want to disturb the man, but he also didn't want to walk away from the doors. "Please open. I beg you by all the stars in the sky. I know that this is what I asked for, but I've made a terrible mistake. I want to take it back, to take it all back. I just want to go back to before. Please, please, please." The doors did not stir. "I'll give you everything I have. I'll give you everything I am. The nights I spent staring at the stars, the crash of the sea waves, the view of my world on our wedding day, I'll give you her face the day we met, even that. Just, if you're there, if you're real, the way the stories say, if you have in you pity for a man so small as I, just let it be different than it is." The words rushed over Darien, and he knew without a doubt who knelt in the dust. "Bluebeard," he whispered, but the man turned all the same. His face wore only a few of the creases of the captain Darien knew, and his beard had no gray. He wore no eye patch. The empty socket stared back at Darien. His good eye widened, and he took in a sharp breath. You're the boy I saw in Linda's stone." Bluebeard scrambled to his feet and clamped onto Darien's shoulders, and the world went dark. Blacker and blacker than any darkness Darien had ever known. A shiver went down his spine. Something circled him in the shadows. He thought of Bluebeard describing the chamber within the temple of the Mahaji. It did not grow closer, but he felt it, scrutinizing him. Darien opened his eyes. He stood in the Kraken with the star engine held high over his head. Flakes of frost floated from the engine, like snow from a lazy sky. He no longer felt his hands, they had grown so cold. Dust still caked his lips, and he still tasted the bitter wind. Bluebeard's voice still rang in his ears. "Let it go! You've got to let it go!" Gent shouted from the door of the room. Darien took a deep breath, the fog of it wreathing his face when he exhaled. Only a gentle glow remained within the engine. Darien recognized it as the glow of the first spring day each season. Something in the light tasted of forgiveness. Looking into it, Darien knew this engine predated the Kraken. It had powered ships through the cold of space for hundreds of years. Now it lay in his hands and waited for rest. At last for rest. Darien found he did not want to end the engine. It was a beautiful thing in a universe that had too few beautiful things. The light from the engine pulsed, and Darien felt it on his face like Kathy's hand against his cheek. He relented. The engine hit the floor, and for a moment everything froze in place, and it seemed the engine would not break after all. It would be forever frozen on the brink. A great light swept from the glass and knocked Darien and Gent backward to the floor. The engine exploded in a shower of raining light. Fragments of glass sang as they skittered across the floor and filled the room with music. Darien had always thought of music as something ephemeral, but now it filled him and shook him from the inside out. In that music he heard his mother crying. He heard Kathy's voice, excited as it neared the action in a story. He heard the thunderous explosions as Bluebeard stood beside Arlinda at the end of her life. He heard the howl of wind, snow hitting the ground, and the crackling of fire in a stove. He heard the gurgle of blood as Fantasia died, and her laughter, so like a scream. He heard Marialla, breathing softly as she slept beside him in the dark. He heard it all. Tears ran down his cheeks and sobs racked his body. They were tears that had been locked deep inside him, sobs that his body had been quivering to let loose. They passed, but they did not leave him feeling drained. Strength flowed into him. The music faded to a hum, more felt than heard. A groan shuddered through the Kraken. It convulsed, the very skin of the ship shivering with the loss of its heart. The lights flickered and left Darien in the fading glamour of the engine shards. His breath hitched as he thought of the ruined ship he had walked through at night, the skeletons scattered amidst flowers. The lights hummed back to life, red emergency bulbs pulsing alongside the regular lighting of the ship. Darien made his way to Gent's side. "This ship has been my life for as long as my life has mattered." Darien put his hand on Gent's shoulder. "I'm sorry." Gent leaned on the doorframe. "Well, your escape is underway. I thought at least one of us would be dead by now." The ship lurched to one side, so that Darien had to grab onto the wall. "Still plenty of time for that," he said with a wry smile. "The sooner we get to the brig, the sooner we can get off the ship." Gent groaned. "This again! The slaves are a lost cause. By the time we get them out, the ship will be careening out of the sky. Darien set his jaw and started walking. They're not slaves, they're people. I'm going with or without you. Gent looked down at his ruined jacket and shook his head. Knowing you has proved to be very bad for my wardrobe, my sanity, and probably my health. Well then, in for a jacket, in for your life. Let's go. They ran together through the dying ship. The shriek of metal skittered down the corridors. Darien tried not to think about the fact that only the docking rig and the maneuvering thrusters kept the ship in the sky. Without the engine to warp space-time, nothing could hold them from the grasp of gravity. Eventually, the thrusters would burn out, the fuel would run out, or the docking rig would shear. The prisoners huddled together, heads down, in the corner of their cell. A violent vibration rattled the bars in a disharmonic chorus, and several of the captives moaned and squeezed their eyes shut. Gent hung back as Darien stepped up and wrapped his hands around the bars. I don't imagine they're going to be very happy with me when we let them loose. Darien glanced back. Well, you did keep them locked up here. You'll just have to put up with their withering glares. It's not their withering glares that worry me so much as the knives they might find a place for in my back. The prisoners watched them with wary eyes. Cassie stood at the front of the group. Blood trickled from a thin cut on her face. Her eyes set on Darien, and he started back at the weight of the hatred they held. What do you want? Darien steadied his resolve. We're here to set you free. She let out a short laugh. I've seen what it means when pirates set someone free. That thing, I won't call him a man. He promised me he had simply set my brother free. Thunder cracked, and the ship lurched, sending everyone rolling to one side. A short plunge followed, filling the air with screams, before the ship sluggishly righted. Darien and Gent scrambled to their feet as the prisoners helped one another up. That wasn't structural strain, Gent growled. We're under fire. She won't last long now, not without her engine. If we're doing this, you need to get those doors open. Darien worked the lock, fingers fumbling over the electronic mechanism. It took him 2 tries to get the code right. The door slid aside, but no one rushed to freedom. They hung back. Darien's shadow fell on them, and he realized how he must look, looming with one hand on the hilt of his sword. He dropped his arm from the weapon and waved them forward. Come on, damn it! You told me to do something, so here I am. Come with us, or you'll die on this ship. Cassie met Darien's gaze and nodded slowly. She moved to help the others. The former captives stepped out of their cell with the dazed movements of people who didn't quite believe they were awake. Gent counted quietly under his breath and muttered, It's going to be a tight fit to get us all into an escape pod. Darien thought of Night, trapped at Bluebeard's side. He would never have ended up in the bowel of the Kraken if it weren't for Night, leading him to the pirate storehouse. But then, without the sword, he would have died, a ruined city his tombstone. Bluebeard's sword weighed at his side, an anchor to the captain's past. Darien thought of the man he had seen kneeling alone in a desert of ash beneath the Palace of Mirrors. His fist tightened around the hilt of the captain's sword. Take 1 off your count. Gent frowned. What do you mean? You can't be suggesting we leave somebody behind. I'm going back for Bluebeard. Gent gaped. Ruins of hell and the hair of it too. You really do have a death wish. He paused before continuing. I'll go with you. Darien took him by the shoulders and nodded to the people gathered outside the cell. No, you have to get them off the ship. Another wave of thunder, if anything louder than the last, shook them to the bone. Gent took a deep breath. Me? Rescue them? He laughed bitterly. Don't you know who you're talking to? I'm just a selfish pirate. Hell, even the other pirates think I'm vain and frivolous. If you hadn't come on board, I would never have lifted a finger to stop this ship, to stop what it did, to stop Bluebeard. Darien shook his head. But I did come on board. And you saved me. You helped me plot against Bluebeard. You helped me destroy the ship. I know who I'm talking to. That's why I know you can do this. You will do this." The ship lurched and spilled everyone into the bulkhead. With a seeming reluctance, the deck recovered its angle. Gent took Darien by the shoulders and shoved him away down the hall. "Fine, you go get the captain. I might have to be upset if the old man doesn't get off the ship in one piece. Just don't let him separate your head from your shoulders. You watch your head too. Wouldn't want to get any more blood on that fancy shirt of yours." Darien took off at a run, Gent's voice following. "A fine pair of ghosts we'll make, headless and covered in blood. Okay, everyone, you don't like me and I'm indifferent about you. But if you want to live, we're going to have to learn to get along. The ship is without an engine, apparently under attack, and filled with bloodthirsty pirates. Do what I say, and maybe, just maybe, only some of us will end up dead in a smoking crater." The rumble of their feet traveled away from Darien into the ship. He wondered for a short moment if he would ever see Gent again, and then laughed ruefully. He knew the answer, knew it deep down, knew they would never meet again. Probably they would both die today. He pushed the knowledge down. Right now, he didn't need the truth. Right now, he needed a story. So he told himself one where, in the end, he would be able to say they lived happily ever after. Next episode. In the conclusion to the season finale, Darien must find and attempt to rescue Captain Bluebeard from his own ship before it sinks out of the sky. Thank you for listening to Palace of Mirrors. If you liked the show, please give it a 5-star rating on your platform of choice and share it with anyone you know who might enjoy it. I truly appreciate your support. This podcast was produced, written, and narrated by Matthew Lindquist, with music by Nature's Eye on Pixabay.